If you fly over a field of modern agricultural sugarcane, you are looking at millions of identical clones. Every plant shares the exact same height, color, and structure. Now compare that to any crowd of humans. We are endlessly diverse in our physical traits. Why does that gap exist? This table shows diversity's origin. Asexual cloning is highly accurate, causing minor differences. Sexual reproduction combines two parents, maximizing diversity. Notice the bottom section. Diversity brings evolutionary advantage. While extreme heat waves kill identical clones, varied populations contain resistant variants that survive and reproduce. This branching diagram maps out how survival traits stick around. You can see Generation 1 inheriting a basic body design from Generation 0, adding subtle changes. By Generation 2, offspring carry both inherited past variations and their own new mutations. Biological variation functions as an active, compounding engine, a mechanism designed specifically to prevent species extinction. These Polaroids show human variation. Some have free-hanging earlobes, while others are physically attached. The right side explains the mechanics driving this. Parents contribute equal amounts of genetic material. Therefore, for any given trait, a biological coin flip occurs between the paternal and maternal code. Because of this dual contribution, every child carries exactly two versions of every genetic instruction. You are a uniquely constructed mosaic, built from two competing sets of microscopic blueprints. Gregor Mendel was the first person to realize that this chaotic collision of blueprints actually followed strict rules. By methodically breeding the simple garden pea and keeping exhaustive mathematical counts of their traits, he cracked the code of inheritance. This trait dictionary table lays out Mendel's core discovery. He categorized traits into two types. Dominant traits, marked with a capital letter, are powerful. They require only one genetic copy from either parent to physically appear. Recessive traits, marked with a lowercase letter, are weaker. They require two exact copies, one from each parent, to successfully manifest. This diagram tracks a single trait, plant height, across two generations. When Mendel crossed a pure tall plant with a pure short plant, the F1 generation emerged entirely tall. The short trait seemed to vanish. But when those tall plants self-pollinated, the short trait re-emerged in the F2 generation, consistently locking into a predictable 3-to-1 ratio of tall to short plants. Now, this 4-quadrant table expands the scope. Tracking two separate traits simultaneously, like seed shape and color, Mendel found entirely new combinations, like wrinkled yellow seeds. This proved individual traits are passed down independently, forming a strict 9-to-3 to 3-to-1 ratio. Genetic inheritance is a highly organized system governed by predictable mathematical laws. But how does an invisible genetic letter actually build a physical, living structure like a tall plant stem? This 5-step process flow maps out the exact biological assembly line. Your cellular DNA acts as the base information source. A specific section of that DNA, called a gene, codes for a single protein. That sequence then determines enzyme production. If the enzyme is highly efficient, it triggers a massive release of growth hormone, and the physical plant grows tall. If your DNA was one continuous thread, every trait would be permanently linked, making independent assortment impossible. Nature solved this by organizing DNA into discrete chromosomes. Germ cells carry a half set, combining to restore the paired balance in the offspring. The physical characteristics we see in the mirror are simply the final output of millions of microscopic protein factories operating inside us. This 3-panel comparison shows that biological sex is determined differently across the animal kingdom. For some reptiles, environmental cues like incubation temperature decide the sex. For certain snails, sex is fluid and can actively change. But in humans, the mechanism is entirely genetic. This flowchart breaks down our genetic sex determination. The mother has 2 X chromosomes, meaning her germ cell will always provide an X. The father, however, has 1 X and 1 Y. His germ cell acts as the biological switch. If the father's sperm carries an X, the child is female. If it carries a Y, the child is male. This creates a constant, exact 50-50 probability across the human population. Biological sex is decided by a single microscopic variable, determined entirely by which chromosome the father contributes. The top box in this case study looks at a practical application. A man with blood group A and a woman with blood group O have a daughter with group O. Does this prove O is dominant? No. Visible traits alone are insufficient evidence. We need the father's specific genetic makeup to determine true dominance. The bottom scenario demonstrates how we can solve that. If a tall violet plant and a short white plant produce offspring that are all violet but 50% short, we can work backward. The 50% short progeny tells us the tall parent must be carrying a hidden recessive gene for shortness. This final mastery checklist boils the entire biological system down to 4 pillars. Variation drives evolutionary survival. Dual inheritance ensures 2 genetic blueprints per trait. Chromosomes allow independent assortment, and the paternal contribution acts as the sex switch. Ultimately, the invisible codes of heredity serve as the active, readable rules governing all life on Earth.